Question 2, and I'll move it a little quicker. Mark Minkin says, my question is, what effect does Psalm 110:1 and Luke 20, verses 42-43, have on the timing or placement of the rapture of the church in reference to the tribulation? Okay, let's look at this. And I admittedly, I am not settled on some of these issues. Okay, so I'm just going to share some thoughts based upon the verses you've put up. And for those who don't know me that well, when I say I'm not settled, I don't mean I'm going to pretend to be on the fence because I think it's more diplomatic and I'll make more friends. I really mean I'm unsettled in these issues. I am not sure where I stand. I mean, I'm premillennial, so I believe the millennium's coming, and I do think the tribulation is a literal 7 years. I think that's the case. I think that's what Scripture's teaching. I'm open to other views, even post-mill view, on-mill views. I'm open to those, but I have a video on going through these different views of eschatology. As long as you're at least saying, Jesus, there's a bodily resurrection, and Jesus is going to judge, come back. He's going to be bodily resurrected. He's bodily resurrecting us, and there will be an eternal kingdom in that state. Those are like core Christian doctrines. But the timing of the rapture, yeah, I'm not personally confident. Although I'm supposed to be, or so everyone tells me. Okay, so Psalm 110:1, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. This is actually, I think Psalm 110 is the most commonly quoted psalm in the New Testament. Most commonly quoted Old Testament verse in the New Testament, I believe, altogether, Psalm 110. So the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. And perhaps you're thinking, well, this would mean maybe that the rapture wouldn't be happening until at the end of the tribulation, because Jesus is sitting at the right hand of the Father until that point, so he can't leave. Maybe that's what you're thinking. That might be kind of a wooden way of taking Psalm 110, as if Psalm 110 is saying, you are glued in this location and you cannot depart from it until this thing happens. I think that might be pushing the passage farther than it's intending. But let's look at Luke 20, verse 42-43. For David himself says in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Okay, in this passage in Luke chapter 20, it doesn't really give us context to make us think that it's talking about the rapture or that sort of thing. If you just, I'll just give you the short version. This is not an eschatological passage in the larger section of Scripture, right? He talks before and after this about other topics. So all we have is verses 41-44 in this particular section. He said to them, how can they say that the Christ is David's son? For David himself says in the book of Psalms, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. David thus calls him Lord. How is he his son? Jesus is not here trying to communicate eschatology. Not that this verse doesn't have impact on that, but that's not the point in this passage. Jesus is talking about the identity of the Son of Man, of Christ, of himself. And he's saying, they want to reduce Jesus to merely being the son of David. And he wants to show he is the son of David, but he's more than that, because the Lord said to my Lord, see, he's greater than David. Jesus is talking here about his exalted state of being God, his deity. So these two verses, I think, are a wash so far when it comes to the timing of the rapture. This is one of my issues with the teaching I'd received, being a Calvary guy for so many years, is that, and I love Calvaries, okay? Like big time approval of Calvary chapels in so many ways. All right. Feel like I'm still a Calvary guy here, but one of the, within the larger acceptance of the movement and the excitement I have about it, here's an issue, is that a lot of verses that have very little to do with the rapture are sometimes being brought to talk about that topic. And that is one of the reasons why when I started to study it in more detail, I went, some of these proof texts I feel like aren't really, they're not saying the rapture is wrong, but they're just not really about it at all. And so that is something we should watch out for. I don't want to be trying to use Scripture to prove something I already believe. I want to be just taking Scripture at face value and letting it say what it says. At least that's the goal.